Call the member for Borkham Hills.
Mr Acting Speaker, thank you for giving me the opportunity to make some remarks and take note of the new liquor licensing laws. I do so, Mr Acting Speaker, with more than a passing interest in these laws and indeed the hospitality industry, although it's been some 7 years since I was the Deputy Chief Executive of the Australian Hotels Association, and I have to admit being more than a little bit rusty on licensing laws, and I certainly, like the previous speaker, am not familiar with licensed premises after the hours of about 9 or 10 o'clock. I am, however, and would disclose that I am a director of a very large registered club in the Hills District, the Castle Hill RSL, which of course is the owner of other licensed premises. But again, Mr Acting Speaker, my presence at these licensed premises, my presence at registered clubs these days is normally surrounded around the local under-12 soccer matches and the Easter egg raffles and the swimming club, because as happens quite regularly in one's life, children take over your recreational time. I'm delighted that the Castle Hill RSL Club has been so accommodating to myself, my family and indeed my community in providing recreational resources and facilities for our young people. And I think that's important to note. Not everything about the liquor industry is evil, not everything about the liquor industry is bad. The liquor industry in my community provides certainly the registered club that I'm a director of provides over $1 million a year in support for community activities, support that the government just can't afford to provide, sponsoring soccer clubs, gymnastics, swimming clubs, various support groups for charitable and community and multicultural needs that need to be addressed in my electorate, and indeed the electorates of Castle Hill and Hawkesbury and Parramatta. But I do wish to stand today and speak about the new liquor licensing laws, proudly wearing my Parramatta Eels tie, because it is important to note that liquor has an interesting interdependence with the sporting fraternity. And whilst we have yet to see these laws really operate in their full capacity, I'm confident to say that I believe they will be effective, and I congratulate the Minister for Gaming and Racing and the Premier in helping to introduce this legislation designed to reduce alcohol-related violence, which has resulted in too many tragic deaths. And if I can just pause there and remind the House that indeed young Thomas Kelly was a student in my electorate. He was very well loved by the King's community, which is in my electorate, and I have had previous opportunities to speak on his death, which has certainly created more motivation for me to speak on these laws and related legislation. In voting for the legislation, I also remind the House that spoken about the concerns that I'd previously referred to the Premier, and my apology that I gave to Mr and Mrs Kelly because of the way that I think the system had failed their son at the time of the sentencing of his murderer. But I do wish to raise also three particular concerns I have. Firstly, my belief is that we can never be too strong when we clamp down on illicit drugs. And a lot of the problems that are relating to alcohol crime or alcohol-induced crime at the moment is because of their mixture with illicit drugs. And I note that when the current CEO of the AHA mentioned that at a Four Corners report some time ago, he was actually criticised quite heavily. And I don't know why, because as somebody who has, as I've said, spent the better half of the last decade in and out of the alcohol fraternity industry, there is a great concern in the industry that the use of illicit drugs has certainly made the situation with alcohol-related crime even worse. I know I'm echoing the concerns of many other members of the government when I've made the point that the laws currently fail to prevent the result of mixing illicit drugs and steroids. Now, the Premier has addressed that, but in previous laws up until now have failed to address that fact that the mixing of these drugs and particularly steroids has created a mindset of violence. The dangerous combination of drugs and alcohol leads to unpredictable results, especially when mixed with drugs that have been laced with toxic substances such as drain cleaner and tranquilisers. It leads to users being out of control. Our police, who do a great job in the tough environment of the city in King's Cross late at night, I know very well some of the police in King's Cross, many of them who contact me regularly because of relationships they've had with members of my family and other friends, and they say to me that it is unbearable to maintain a working relationship with some of the licensed premises there simply because of the stuff that is occurring on the street. There is no even playing field for those that are just trying to do run a law-abiding venue. We must give them more power to stop those people who are mixing drugs. We need to send clear signals throughout the legal system that this behaviour is unacceptable. And I also find it a disgrace that clean skin wine from Dan Murphy's is cheaper than a schooner of beer at a club. I note that today I can buy a clean skin bottle of wine for $2.85 or Bowler's Run Sauvignon Blanc at Dan Murphy's, but where I'm informed that the kids go for cheap alcohol, at Schooner at King's Cross is $7, so you can buy a bottle of wine for half the price of a schooner of beer. To put that into perspective, $2.85 for over 7 standard drinks is less than 40 cents per standard drink. And I'm appalled that alcohol is so freely and cheaply available in that matter. The problem with alcohol that is consumed by a minority in a manner which is dangerous. They pre-drink, they pre-fuel because it only costs $2.85. This pre-drinking is dangerous and irresponsible. Furthermore, it occurs without supervision. Pubs and clubs adhere to responsible service of alcohol regulations, and in the absence of those who serve responsibly in public, these idiots drink copious amounts of alcohol at home and then go into the community and assault people. When alcohol is so cheap and so easily available, it is no surprise that these abhorrent acts occur. I therefore regularly called upon Wesfarmers and Woolworths to seriously consider voluntary withdrawing such heavily discounted liquor from sale. Third, personal responsibility is extremely important. While the deaths as a result of coward punches are mostly random, it is important that parents help their kids make responsible decisions in life. I've been a supporter of life education and I've been a director of life education, which educates over 300,000 students in over 1,400 schools each year. A research that the Reverend Jay Bassett, the CEO of Life Education, has shown me illustrates that earlier children are educated and develop responsible attitudes towards alcohol, violence and relationships, the greater the likelihood they will be responsible attitudes later in life and make responsible decisions. I actually have encouraged all parents to include their children, make sure these children go through these types of programs. And I encourage schools in my electorate to bring life education into their syllabus. Effective drug and alcohol education is the only way where we will be able to ensure responsible behaviour in the community. People need to take responsibility for their actions, and undergoing drug and alcohol education will help people make the right course of action, much like the way they address smoking and drink driving these days. After the trial of Thomas Kelly's killer, I asked here how many more schoolboys will die before the rights of victims of crime become paramount concern to our legal system. The government has introduced minimum sentences for those who commit these horrific acts of violence and ensuring that those who kill under the influence of alcohol go to prison. This, along with the legislation that took effect this week, should hopefully reduce the incidents. Mr Acting Speaker, I may be out of touch with the modern world, but I still find it extraordinary that we live in a city that allows a state-sponsored heroin injection room to operate at King's Cross, but we make it so hard for licensed premises to go about their law-abiding business, whilst, of course, at the same time, alcohol is sold so cheap onto the streets. And for that reason, I was quite surprised to see the Law Society's letters lobbying us against minimum sentencing because it says that it reduces the incentive to plead guilty. I just found that no argument. I mean, why would we care about an incentive for somebody to plead guilty if they are in fact innocent, or indeed vice versa? So, Mr Acting Speaker, I just commend to the House this legislation. The children of New South Wales deserve a very, very strong message from this place about the dangers of alcohol.